As a night shift cop in rural Montana, I broke the haunted rule that changed everything. I never should have opened that door. The chill in the air turned sharper the moment I pushed the latch. My night had started like any other, cruising down empty roads, the moon's silver light casting eerie shadows across the ground. The small town lay nestled among dark hills, a sleepy place where everyone knew everyone or at least pretended to. I declocked in my shift, checked my gear, and drifted through the same pattern of patrolling the streets. But tonight felt different. A weight hung heavy in the air, vibrating with an unnameable tension. As I rolled past the old church, its windows dark like empty eyes, I caught the scent of wet earth mixed with something sharp, a lingering stench of decay that made my stomach twist. I shrugged it off, but goosebumps prickled my skin. Then came the whispers. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves. But they got louder, scraping at the edges of my mind. Shadows flitted through the corners of my vision, darting away the moment I turned my head. I pushed down the rising tide of dread. I couldn't let fear grip me here. Not in a place I thought I knew so well. The siren's call of my radio broke the silence. A call about a disturbance near the old factory on the outskirts of town. My heart raced as I pulled up. The building loomed like a toothless giant, broken and sagging. Cold wind howled through the cracked windows, echoing like the cries of souls trapped inside. I stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, the air thick and suffocating around me. A faint flicker of light pierced the darkness from somewhere inside. I felt drawn to it. My hands trembled as I reached for the door. It creaked open, the old wood protesting like a warning. I took a step inside, the chill wrapping around me like fingers, cold and unforgiving. My heart thumped loud enough I was sure it would drown out the faint sounds coming from deeper within the building. Was it a voice? Laughter? I couldn't tell. Then came the sound of something falling, a crash of glass followed by silence. My pulse quickened. Anxiety clawed at my gut. I stepped further inside, drawn not only by instinct but by some invisible force pulling at me. Shadows danced just beyond the reach of my flashlight, teasing my perception. And then I noticed it. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, silhouetted against the flickering light. Heart hammering, breath quickening, I opened my mouth to call out, but the words caught in my throat. Clarity slipped away as the figure turned, its face shrouded in darkness. I couldn't move. The air turned electric, static crackling around me. The world went silent, as if everything held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The figure lurched forward. I stumbled back, adrenaline flooding my veins. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. Am I trapped? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness folded around me, a suffocating shroud. I remained frozen, the figure advancing with a fluid grace that stole my breath. I scanned the room, desperate for escape or help, but walls closed in, mocking me with their solidity. The echoes of its steps felt like a metronome counting down to my doom. Who is there? My voice trembled, the words stuttering out, punctuated by the fear gnawing at my gut. The figure slowed, revealing an outline cloaked in rags that hung like old, torn cobwebs. It was a silhouette layered in shadows, features indistinct yet imbued with a malevolent promise that made my heart shriek in protest. That it stopped mere feet from me, a breath of air rushing past its invisible face, chilling and pungent. I felt the bile rise, the rot of something long lost filling my nostrils. It raised a hand, crooked fingers extending, and I thought of reaching for my weapon, yet my limbs betrayed me, locked in place as if I were ensnared in a nightmare with no hope of waking. Then, it spoke. Not with words, but a low, guttural sound that rent the stillness and struck deep into my bones, as if ancient sorrows were clawing their way into my mind. Images flared in my vision: a boy crying, a house engulfed in flames, shadows of people I couldn't recognize standing around the walls. They were silent, but I felt their despair, a sea of lost memories crashing against my psyche, time stretched and warped, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. I steeled myself, willing my body to move, to run, but the figure simply stood, watching, its presence like a well of despair. I finally wrestled my gaze away, desperately searching for another path in the embrace of gloom. Then, I heard it again. The whispering. It swelled around me like a tide, a cacophony of voices weaving together in a haunting symphony that was both terrifying and sorrowful. "Help us, set us free," they pleaded, echoing through the rotted beams and broken walls. The figure twitched slightly as if roused by the cries, its gaze focused on the shadows, and for a split second, I saw the flicker of something human behind the darkness. But then it vanished, swallowed by the encroaching void. The whispers grew closer, encircling me, suffocating my sanity. "Get out," I croaked, lunging back, driven by sheer instinct. The figure lunged forward, and instinct kicked in. I turned, dashing down the hallway, my heartbeat hammering wildly in my ears. Behind me, the breath of the shadow quickened as it chased, its footsteps echoing a macabre melody. That I rounded a corner and stumbled into a room, the dank air thick with dust and memories forgotten. It was a makeshift holding place, with rusted chains dangling from the ceiling, remnants of some unfathomable horror. The sight clawed anew at the remnants of my courage, but there was no time to think. Despair propelled me forward. As I turned to face the door, the chilling realization sank in. The figure was no closer, but the whispers rushed around me, more agitated now, chanting in a savage rhythm that filled the air with a palpable dread. Join us," they beckoned, and I staggered back as unseen hands clawed at my spirit, trying to pull me into their suffocating embrace. An urgent thumping resonated now, almost like a heartbeat. The walls seemed alive, pulsing with the life of something within. I pressed against a window, gazing outside, but moonlight was swallowed by a dark cloud that rolled in, blotting out the light. I lunged back toward the door, but the figure stood there, blocking my escape, a pointed smile emerging from the void where a face should have been. I backed away, my chest constricting with panic as my flashlight flickered and dimmed, the shadows creeping closer. Then, the air crackled with a sudden surge of energy, embracing the darkness, setting my nerves alight. A glimmer of light broke through a crack in the wall, a path, a glimmer of hope, but as I turned to flee again, I heard a scream. Not the echo of my own fear, but a real, haunting shriek resonating from deep within the building. It was a cry of pure anguish, tearing through the confines of my mind as if ripping apart the very fabric of reality. My feet, however, unyieldingly remained frozen, driven by the urge to remain, to uncover the mystery looming over me, or perhaps, to become part of it. That's when I heard it. The sound of grinding metal, the echoing creak of something awakening behind me. The shadows sparked, and I turned one last time. What I saw made my blood freeze. Rising from the depths of despair was not the figure but something worse, a twisted amalgamation of the lost souls, drawn forth from the darkness, their eyes hollow and desperate. And I realized too late that I was no longer just a witness, I was the final piece in the puzzle of their torment. Before I could scream or run, they began to merge into a grotesque visage, reaching out with empty mouths that thirsted for my soul. In that moment, the reality of my fate coalesced. I was trapped within the haunted ruins of the factory and the very ghosts I had disturbed. And as darkness spilled around me, I knew there was only one question left: what would become of me, in their unending night? The air was thick with the scent of decay, the mustiness of age, and an underlying note of desperation that seeped from the very walls, as if the building itself were a vessel for the torment it had witnessed. I could hardly breathe, each gasping inhale turning into a retch as I stumbled back, a fresh wave of icy dread flooding through me as the tortured souls morphed into a nightmarish shape. The cacophony of whispers escalated, rising to a deafening crescendo around me, urging me to join them. "You belong with us," they implored, their voices a jarring mixture of pleading and rage. My heart raced, beating a frantic rhythm against my ribcage, yet something primal held me captive, fear planting me firmly in place as they twisted closer, a dizzying blur of outstretched hands and eyes dripping with sorrow that I pulled myself together, grasping desperately at resolve like a lifeline. Fleeing was my only choice. As I turned again, however, a distant rumble shattered my fleeting courage. The sound, rich and terrible, echoed through the breadth of the factory, reverberating like thunder in a storm. Moments later, the ground shook beneath my feet, sending a violent tremor racing through the rotting floorboards. I lost my balance and fell, palms scraping against the splintered wood, bracing for whatever torment awaited next. In that second of vulnerability, I noticed bizarre symbols etched into the floor nearby, primitive runes tangled with traces of ash, swirling and intertwining like the barred branches of some sinister tree. I could feel them. They pulsed against the darkness, simmering with an energy that suggested they had been marked with blood and sorrow long before my arrival. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, a rippling tide pooling at my feet as a piercing scream split through the thick air, slicing my thoughts to ribbons. I jerked my head around, terror winding tighter within me when I caught sight of a figure emerging from one of the heavy, rusted doors at the far end of the room. It was a woman, her face gaunt and hollow, tears streaming down her cheeks as she called out, "You have to stop them. They'll take you too." But before I could gather my wits to respond, the spirits surged in a frantic rush, pressing around her like a swarm, pulling her gently but with horrible insistence. Her scream echoed off the walls, but her lips moved as if in a silent plea, words swallowed by the whirlpool of chaos. "Stop!" I yelled at the spirits, my voice cracking. "Leave her alone." With a snap and a jolt of clarity, I lunged for the woman, desperate to pull her from their grasp, but as I reached for her hand, it felt as though I had plunged into liquid shadows. The chilling energy shocked my senses and propelled me back. The whispers screamed louder, enraged by my defiance. The wails of lost souls echoed, each cry sounding both familiar and hauntingly alien. The entire building shook again, more violently this time, as if the very roots of its existence were writhing beneath the weight of our suffering. Dust cascaded like a veil from above, the ambient light waning as dark clouds filled the sky outside, dimming the meager glow from the moon. I turned toward the door, hoping to sprint back through the entry I had come from, but instead found myself staring into an expanding black void. The woman was still there, but the spirits had almost fully enveloped her now, their faces twisting into monstrous visages that forced her to kneel. "This is your fate," they screeched, their hands outstretched toward me, begging for freedom. In a moment of clarity, I grasped the cold iron of the chains hanging from the ceiling, ignoring the blood staining the ground beneath me as I pulled myself up. If I couldn't save the woman, maybe I could fight back. I swung the chains outward, aiming for the mass of writhing bodies. "Let her go." With every ounce of strength I could muster, I smashed the chains into the mass of spirits. A wail erupted, piercing through the cacophony as a blinding flash engulfed the room. Blinding light consumed the shadows, and I was hurled backwards, crashing to the ground and gasping for breath. The oppressive weight of despair momentarily lifted, yet as I covered my eyes to shield them from the brightness, I felt the sensation of being watched, a gaze that bore down with unrelenting hunger. As the light faded, there they stood, not just the tortured souls, but the figure from before, now more solid, no longer just a silhouette but a twisted embodiment of despair. Its face was an unending void, and where its eyes ought to be, I could see dark voids pulling at my very essence. "Now you will join us," it hissed, and in an instant, the room surged with an abyss of wind that swept through like a predator closing in on its prey, and just as my breath caught in my throat, the cold realization struck me: I was not merely trapped, I was being summoned. The shadows clenched around me, and I felt myself dragged closer to the swirling mass of souls, every frantic instinct demanding escape, yet rooted to the spot by the inevitability of what was coming. In that moment, a terrible and bone-chilling thought filled my mind: what if the spirits sought not a release, but a replacement? If I could not cling to my resolve, would I become just another whisper that begged for someone else's help, for eternity? The figure came closer, and with a vibration that rattled my bones, it whispered, you're ours now. My scream echoed unanswered through the empty halls, swallowed by the darkness that now pulsed with life. Would I truly join their ranks, or could I break free? But before that question lingered long enough to dissipate, darkness swarmed around me, and I felt my spirit beginning to fragment. Then it hit me. My watch, set to midnight, glowed ominously in the depths of my pocket, the time frozen in place, like everything else in this cursed realm. And just as I thought I had found a glimmer of hope, the seconds began to change. Each tick seemed to pull me deeper. What had I awakened in my quest for answers, and more importantly, would I re-emerge as the person I once was, or as something far worse? The shadows coiled tighter around me as I felt the chill of souls past clawing at my heart. The thick air pulsated with an electric tension, each breath felt like an affront to the enigma brooding in those depths. I could sense it now, a dreadful awareness flooding my senses, filling the void created by the whispering shadows. Suddenly, the figure loomed above me, its absence of eyes pressing into my very being. I wanted to look away, to escape, but I felt trapped in its gaze, a puppeteer pulling on all the strings of my fear. You are chosen, it rasped, its voice like gravel tearing through silk, echoing in the chambers of my mind. The doorway opens wider with your anguish. My heart raced at the thought of becoming one of them, a voice lost, an echo of desolation. Desperate to break free, I turned from the looming entity and sought refuge among the debris. A pile of rusted metal sheets lay nearby, remnants of some bygone machinery, possibly the last vestiges of this hellish factory's existence. My fingers brushed against the jagged edge, feeling the familiar warmth of blood that still clung to it, the essence of those who had come before me. In that fleeting moment of clarity, an idea ignited in my mind. I would not let them claim me without a fight. Gripping a piece of the sheet, I prepared myself to face the gathering tide of spirits. You want me to join you? I shouted, my voice ringing out against the oppressive silence that had followed my scream. Then you will have to take me to drag me down, kicking and screaming. The response was immediate, a chorus of anguished wails filled the air, a sound more potent than any weapon I could wield. As the spirits surged, drawn to my defiance, I lifted the metal sheet high above my head. But as I swung down to shatter the waiting void, the darkness remained unharmed, tugging at my sanity as if the shadows themselves were laced with their own malevolence. Then, something shifted, a whisper sliced through the tumult. It was a new voice, layered among the cacophony with a hypnotic tone, slicing through the air like a knife. You're stronger than you know, it urged, seductive and warm. Fight. You can still reverse it. Just as I was about to retort, my feet lost purchase on the rotting floor, and I collapsed through the raspy echoes beneath me. I grasped desperately at the metal sheet, sending it crashing down into the depths of the swirling shadows. The clang reverberated wildly, stirring a frenzy amongst the roiling mass. With renewed determination, I channeled the energy of centuries past into my blows, each swing an act of rebellion against the tide of fate tightening around me. No. I will not succumb. I screamed, my voice resonating across the vast emptiness. But instead of repelling them, I sensed an unsettling shift. The spirits recoiled, yet the figure loomed closer, twisting its outstretched hands as if inviting me into a terrible waltz. When you entered this place, you ignited what was long buried. It hissed closer now, its presence a looming shadow eclipsing my escape. Fates are but chains waiting to be broken. Can you hear them? The bonds call out for you. Then suddenly, the ground beneath me erupted as if the foundation of the world split open. A vortex of shadows swirled violently, catching me off guard. I stumbled backward, losing my grip on the metal sheet, as I was drawn toward the fathomless depth of a dark whirlpool pulsating with desperate spirits clawing their way out. My heart raced as chaos consumed everything around me, yet amidst it all, I could hear that voice again, piercing through the cacophony like a beacon. You're not alone. It cried, heavy with an urgency that tingled at the edges of my reason. Remember why you came. Visions cascaded through my mind, faces of friends and loved ones, images of laughter shared and memories created, all fighting against the malevolent grasp. I steeled my resolve, channeling every ounce of defiance that surged within me, igniting against despair. I will not give in. I bellowed, bracing against the pull of the abyss. As I struggled to Break away, something unexpected happened. The fabric of reality beneath my feet began to shimmer, the very walls of the factory quaking as ancient stones cried out with voices of those once imprisoned here. Each heartbeat echoed vengeance, inflating my courage until I bellowed, "You want my anguish? Then take this instead." With a final surge, I hurled the sheet toward the figure, a flash of light erupting as it connected. The sound echoed like a thunderclap, piercing through the shadows, and for a moment, I saw the figure recoil in agony, darkness expanding behind it, but as the shadows began to pull back, I felt an overwhelming force gripping my soul, tugging me toward the very center of the vortex. Through the blinding pain, I glimpsed thousands of faces swirling around me, eyes filled with both fear and longing. "You will never leave," they cried in unison, their voices merging into an insatiable chorus, and then, the blood-curdling silence fell as the relentless shadows seeped into my skin, suffocating, twisting with my essence. I was caught in a riptide of chaos, and just as I felt my resolve flicker, a scream erupted from my lips, a wordless anguish filled with terror, and then, the entire world exploded into darkness. As everything faded into nothingness, I found myself standing alone in a small, dimly lit room, the air rich with the scent of decay, familiar yet distinctly altered. In the corner, a mirror collected dust and shadows. And with my heart pounding, I took a hesitant step toward it, feeling the cold tremor of inevitability surge through me. The moment I peered into the glass, the reflection staring back was not my own, but that of a wretched spirit, hollow eyes pleading desperately, and just beside it, a new voice whispered, low and malevolent, "Welcome to your new home." The walls of the small room pressed in on me, the corners shrouded in an unyielding darkness that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. I could feel the weight of the air thickening, each breath steeped in memories I could not recall, as if time had folded over itself like the pages of a forgotten book. The mirror stood before me, a portal to some wretched realm, and I'd been foolish enough to gaze into it. My reflection writhed like smoke trapped in glass, the spirit's hollow eyes staring back with an intensity that froze my blood. It was a face I had never seen but felt inexplicably connected to, as if we were two sides of the same cursed coin. The whisper echoed in my ears, each syllable resonating with a chilling finality. "Welcome to your new home," the words slithered around me, curling like the very shadows that danced just out of sight. I turned my back on the mirror, trying to shake off the dread that clung to my skin like a second layer, but the room retaliated. The air thickened, stirring with a malevolence that felt sentient, wrapping around me like a noose. "Get out," I muttered under my breath, desperation clawing at my throat. But as I took a step towards the door, it swung open of its own accord, revealing a hallway stretching infinitely into darkness, flickering lights above casting eerie shadows that twisted like skeletal hands reaching out to me. One flickering bulb buzzed ominously, and I could almost hear it laughing a taunting, sinister sound that filled me with dread that I had to move, but my legs felt like lead. Each step echoed hauntingly in the desolate expanse until the floor beneath my feet transitioned from worn wood to cold tile that sent shivers racing up my spine. The atmosphere thickened like a fog, laden with unspeakable horrors and whispers that grew louder, tugging at the sanity I fought to hold on to. "Where am I?" I breathed, each word a fragile thread straining against the weight of an overwhelming presence. And then, from behind me, came a soft crackle of energy, a sound that reverberated against my back like the wings of a moth darting toward a flame. That I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as I fully expected to face the spirit in the mirror again, but the hallway was empty. Darkness cloaked the corners, deepening with every passing moment, yet there was a suffocating sensation of being watched. A kind of scrutiny that burrowed into my thoughts like a parasite that I forced myself to move forward, ready to confront whatever awaited me. I could feel the shadows seeping into my skin, as if trying to draw out the very essence of who I once was. A faint light flickered in the distance, a glowing figure, maybe a way out. The urge to flee seized me, each footfall quickening until I was almost sprinting towards it, desperate for salvation, but as I grew closer, realization hit me like a wrecking ball. The light was not a sign of hope but another lure. It pulsated rhythmically, tauntingly, as I closed in. And at the center stood the outline of a figure, flickering in and out like an old video on the verge of failure. I could feel the darkness coiling tighter around me, the air heavy with despair. "Help me!" I shouted, almost surprised by the resolve in my voice, the words propelled by the fear gnawing at my insides. The figure grew clearer, and I could see the twisting visage, a spectre worn thin by the weight of echoes, its mouth moving in a silent scream. The ground trembled beneath my feet as I staggered back, and the whispers crescendoed, becoming a cacophony of anguished screams. "You cannot help what has already been chosen." The voices cried in a faithless harmony, and the darkness surged toward me in insatiable tide. Just then, a shrill scream pierced through the air, a raw sound laced with desperation. Whipping around, I saw a door slamming shut at the end of the hallway. The screaming faded into the oppressive silence, and in its place, a deep rumble began emanating from the heart of the room, a pulse, rhythmic and promising doom. Before I could process the implications, the figure lunged toward me, its gnarled hand reaching out. I felt a visceral sensation, an aching desire to fall into its embrace. I screamed, stumbling back into a shadowed alcove just as another figure materialized in a flash of pale light behind the first. "Run!" The new apparition hissed, its voice sharp as glass, cutting through the deceptive allure of the advancing spectre. Instinct took over and I turned, bolting away as the sound of footsteps echoed in pursuit, the maddening chorus of voices drifting closer, merging with the relentless tempo of my heart. I raced towards the exit I had seen, terror mounting with each breath, but a hand caught my shoulder, and I swung around, ready to fight, only to find an empty space where the spectre had been. The figure from the depths of the dark hallway wavered into view, its eyes glowing like embers. "Not every choice is yours to make," it bellowed, causing the very fabric of reality to seem to shake under the weight of its words. And then the cacophony surged again, but this time it felt different. An echo, a voice I recognized, a familiar timbre I had almost forgotten, but deeply clung to. "It's coming for you," it whispered, that familiar voice tainted by sorrow. "It wants your torment." Stunned, I pivoted to face the source, confusion flooding my mind. And in an exquisite moment of horror, I realized it was my own voice, echoing across the expanse as the air grew thick, curdling with malice around me. The walls of my reality began to crack, each fissure spilling darkness and despair into the space between breaths. Suddenly, like a punch to the gut, everything fell silent. The shapeless terror drew closer, reaching into the void where I stood frozen. And as the last remnants of light faded from view, the air seized with a palpable tension. I knew, with gut-wrenching certainty, that I was trapped not merely in this house of horrors but within my own unraveling. Then, without warning, the mirror shattered in the corridor behind me, splinters igniting the darkness. An icy wind rushed past, and I glimpsed reflections of my own past life swirling among the shards, tauntingly reaching out with desperate hands, each fragment more exquisite and damning than the last. And as the weight of the darkness became unbearable, I heard it beckoning once more, a sinister whisper curling around my thoughts, promising liberation, if only I surrendered to the shadows. Just before everything imploded, the ground gave way, and I felt myself falling into that swirling maw of despair, the horrendous echoes of a life lost radiating through the void. And in that final moment of descent, I realized the truth: the nightmares had never left me. They were pieces of who I had become, eternally haunting, waiting to be fully embraced. And then, darkness enveloped me completely, leaving only one chilling thought clawing at my mind: I was home. The first breath of the icy void stung my lungs as I tumbled through the darkness, the sensation of raw terror seeping into my bones, suffocating me like a million pinpricks of ice. I fell endlessly, the weight of my fears trailing behind me like a phantom tether. With every heartbeat, whispers echoed through the void, a cacophony of forgotten souls clawing for recognition, begging for release. Suddenly, I landed hard against a surface that seemed to shimmer like oil. For a fleeting moment, I was disoriented, my mind grappling with the vertigo of having crossed boundaries between realms. But as I sat up, a choking sensation clawed at my throat. This was no refuge, this was another layer of nightmare. A dim light illuminated my surroundings, casting a dull sheen over the walls that appeared to writhe like living flesh. They pulsed rhythmically, a sickening mimicry of a heartbeat echoing deep within the chamber. I stood, steadying myself against a wall that felt warm beneath my touch, the sensation both unsettling and strangely familiar, as if I were reconnecting with something that should never have been part of me. "Help!" I mouthed, but the word dissolved into the thick air, lost amid the undulating shadows loitering just beyond the flickering light. I could feel them, the entities of despair, restless in their murmurs, whispering bitter truths, casting doubts that wedged like knives into my resolve. To my left, a corridor branched off into deeper darkness, the shadows swirling hungrily in anticipation, while the opposite passage flickered like a flame-drenched memory yearning for rescue. As I nearly surrendered to the path of despair, a desperate flicker of light caught my eye. Somewhere ahead, a vibrant shimmer pulsed, drawing me in a beacon amidst the festering horror that I stumbled towards it, heart pounding in my chest as I stepped over the threshold into a makeshift room. An ornate table dominated the space, cluttered with items that seemed ancient and forgotten, tattered photographs, a small clock that ticked backwards, and various mementos that hummed with nostalgia. They were remnants of lives that once flourished here, each one intricately tied to a story I could not grasp. At the center lay a tarnished mirror, reflecting an image I couldn't fully discern. It was a darkened silhouette that shifted as I stepped closer, as if it contained fragments of my own existence interwoven with darker fates. I peered into it, hesitant yet compelled. The reflection morphed into a kaleidoscope of faces, people I had wronged, loved ones lost, all entwined in a tapestry of sorrow and betrayal. Their eyes locked onto mine, pleading, accusing. The murmurs swelled again, escalating into agonized wails. "You must remember," they cried, their voices an anguished symphony of spirits intermingling with my own regrets. Shadows slithered closer, their fingertips brushing against my skin, weaving malicious tendrils of doubt through my mind. "No. Stop!" I shouted, flailing as the rush of twisted memories threatened to engulf me. Every soul I had ever encountered clawed to the surface, their collective chaos threatening to drown me once more. The whispers, now a deafening roar, hurled fragments of my past into my consciousness with unbearable weight. As I fought against their despair, something shifted in the shadows. That familiar sense of being watched returned tenfold, a gnawing presence lurking right behind me. I turned, heart racing, expecting to see the gnarled figure again, but instead, I was met with an emptiness filled with a suffocating dread. From the deepest recesses of the darkness, the oppressive weight drew nearer, and the air thickened with a chilling laughter that echoed through the room. The light flickered as if it were about to extinguish, plunging the space into shadow, but the mirror still glowed softly, seemingly defying the encroaching gloom. Desperation clawed at me as I realized I had to act. I lunged toward the mirror, arms outstretched, as I caught a glimpse of someone behind my reflection. A figure stood rooted in the depths of the darkness, its features obscured, but its eyes burned with an intensity that threatened to pull me into oblivion. "Your time is up," it bellowed, its voice a chilling cascade that reverberated through my entire being. Just as I could feel the cool fingers of the shadow reaching toward me, breaking through reality itself, I made contact with the mirror. With a violent surge, the glass shattered from behind the figure, shards erupted in every direction, slicing through the air like daggers. The screams grew deafening once more, punctuated by the clash of glass and the howling wind that swept through the chamber. The light flickered violently, shadows recoiled, and in their chaos, I caught a fleeting glimpse of one last face within the depths of the splintered mirror, a face I knew but could not place, lips moving silently, a shattering echo of betrayal that froze my blood. "Don't turn away," it mouthed desperately. Then, with an ear-piercing shatter, I was pulled backward, my body being torn between worlds, thrust into the darkness once more. As I screamed, the room dissolved around me, silhouette after silhouette merged into a swirling vortex of nightmares, and I felt myself slipping away, losing grip on the few threads of sanity I had left. Darkness enveloped me, and amidst the chaos, one thought blazed clear: the horror that awaited me had always been playing a game. And I was its most tantalizing pawn. Just before everything collapsed into the void, I caught a final glimpse of the reflection from the shattered mirror, myself, but not quite. It smiled. Every whisper of the wind through the towering pines felt like a warning. My breath hung in the cold air as I stepped outside, scanning the sprawling expanse of darkness that enveloped the rural Montana landscape. Shadows stretched across the empty streets, flickering in the dying glow of the streetlights, their feeble illumination painting an eerie tableau of waxy silhouettes. That I had only joined the small police force a few months prior, eager for the thrill of protecting the community, but nothing could prepare me for the whispers of dread that slithered through this quiet town, rumors of disappearances, echoes of terrified cries in the night, and an unshakable feeling that something beyond comprehension lurked nearby. That I walked my nightly beat, always vigilant, but tonight, a tension hung in the air, thickening it until I felt the suffocation of shadows congealing around me. A sense of foreboding gnawed at my gut as I turned down Elm Street, where the fallen autumn leaves whispered a haunted tune. There, at the edge of the forest, stood the old Anderson house, abandoned, decrepit, and rumored to be a focal point of the town's dark history. That it had been years since anyone had ventured close, but I felt an inexplicable pull, a calling from the belly of the ghostly structure. The wood swayed ominously as I approached, limbs like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and the instinct to turn and leave gnawed at my resolve, but curiosity anchored my feet to the ground. With each step toward the house, a strange echo reverberated through me, a haunting melody that seemed to hum beneath the surface, soft, enticing, but pierced through with an underlying scream. I withdrew my flashlights, eager to disperse the darkness, but the beam flickered and died, surrendering to the oppressive gloom. Spurred on by a sudden rush of adrenaline, I pushed open the creaking door. It swung wide with a malevolent groan, as if eager to consume me whole. Inside, remnants of a once vibrant life lingered. A dusty piano sat forlornly in the corner, its keys yellowed with age. A faded family portrait stared down from the wallpaper, the faces scratched and worn, their eyes dark hollows watching my every move. "Hello," I called, my voice a tremulous whisper swallowed by the house's silence. An unsettling stillness unfurled, and with it came the acrid stench of something long decayed, of lost memories and things better left untouched. I felt the pull again, wrapping tightly around my chest, urging me further into the maw of the house. As I navigated the dimly lit hall, shadows twisted at the corners of my eyes, retreating whenever I turned to face them. A chill ran down my spine, and before I could muster the courage to leave, I was drawn toward a dimly lit room at the end of the hallway, where the air grew thick and unwelcoming. It was a child's nursery, untouched by time yet steeped in sorrow, walls lined with faded wallpaper and a dusty mobile that dangled above an empty crib. Something stirred within the shadows, and I held my breath, straining to listen. Suddenly, the soft cooing of an infant drifted through the air, sweet and melodic, yet tinged with an otherworldly edge. I felt the stirrings of an ancient fear clawing at my chest as I edged closer, heart pounding like a war drum. "Is anyone there?" I croaked, every ounce of bravery threatened to collapse. The cooing twisted into a gurgle of laughter, innocent but grotesque, and the shadows danced closer, long, clawed fingers stretching from the corners of the room, reaching, beckoning me to join the spectacle unfolding before me. It was then that I caught sight of the mirror hanging above a rickety dresser, an ornate antique reflecting the twisted reality of the nursery, but as I gazed deeper, the reflection shifted. The shattered pieces I had glimpsed before materialized, forming a familiar silhouette, tormented yet welcoming, urging me to step closer. "Help us," the figure whispered, its lips moving in deliberate agony. My senses screamed for me to retreat, yet terror rooted me in place, mesmerized by the pain radiating from those eyes. Oh, those eyes! I knew them all too well. They belonged to the souls of the children the town had lost over the years, victims of disappearances sewn into local folklore. "No," I muttered, backing away, but the presence surged forward, flooding the room with a cacophony of heart-wrenching cries, twisted laughter, and anguished memories that came crashing into my mind like a tempest. Panicking, I turned to flee, but the wooden floorboards writhed beneath my feet, teething like living things, tightening around my ankles, anchoring me to this contraption of anguish. I could feel the darkness swirl around me, vibrant and full of malicious intent. "Stay!" it shouted, the word reverberating through the nursery with the force of thunder. I twisted again toward the mirror, desperate for escape, only to find the reflection gone, this time superimposed with my own face, disfigured and twisted into the incredulous grin that had left the last parent broken. As I screamed into the void for release, my surroundings blurred, and the very fabric of the house began to splinter, the walls peeling away, the spectral cries crescendoing into a deafening roar. I felt myself unraveling, threads of existence yanked from the seams of reality until, with a final rending scream, a hand shot through the mirror that it was mine that I lost my footing amidst the chaos and stumbled backward, collapsing into darkness as the hand gripped my wrist, its fingers icy and sticky like old sin. The warmth of familiarity and the cold of fear collided within me, blurring the lines between salvation and damnation, for in that moment, as the shadows closed in, I understood what had always awaited me in this haunted town, a reckoning, and the reflection of my own darkness rising to consume me. "Join us," they whispered, their voices intertwining into a chilling symphony that echoed, never fading, forever beckoning. The icy grip tightened around my wrist, an anchor dragging me into both familiarity and dread. I gasped, the chill a shock that pulsed adrenaline through my veins, sharpening my senses. For a split second, the world froze as I beheld the hand that ensnared me, a pallid, ghostly white, adorned with dirt and remnants of long faded flesh. The softness of a child's grip warred with its sinister intent, igniting primal terror deep within me. "Help us," the figment in the mirror pleaded again, but now it came from everywhere, a chorus of disembodied voices weaving through the nursery, rapture mingled with despair. I could feel the encroaching darkness consolidate around me, an unrelenting force. In a desperate burst of energy, I yanked my wrist free, stumbling backward until I collided with the rickety dresser. Books flew from the surface like startled birds, kicking up a cloud of dust that sparkled in the faint light filtering through a cracked window. The nursery seemed to pulse and expand, trapping me in a monumental heartbeat, each thud radiating uncertainty. Panic clawed at me as I turned to the door, but the walls warped and twisted. It felt as if the house itself had come alive, narrowing the passage with spindly arms that reached down from the ceiling and coiled like snakes around my throat. Each heartbeat echoed in my ears, my pulse a screaming invitation to surrender to the void. "Run," a voice inside me screamed, yet my legs felt glued to the floor, an insurmountable weight anchoring me to this cursed space. The darkness shushed the thoughts swirling in my mind, wrapping around me like thick fog, pulling my consciousness towards the mirror once more. I glanced back, my breath hitching as the spectral hand withdrew, revealing a shifting form in the glass, a kaleidoscope of faces, each more beautiful and haunting than the last, an inexplicable cycle of joy and anguish that held me mesmerized. Then came new sounds, the rustle of small feet pattering across the floor, far too soft for comfort. They drew closer, laughter dancing in the air, sweet and sickening, like a melody woven from both sunshine and decay. "Help us! Help us!" they sang, their voices overlapping, crafting a sinister lullaby that tugged at the frayed edges of my sanity. Just beyond the threshold of the nursery door, shadowy figures skittered at the edges of my vision. I blinked rapidly, heart hammering, frantically trying to pin down what I was seeing. The children from the stories, the ones we had searched for, the ones the town had whispered about with curled lips and averted eyes, now stood poised in the darkened hallway, their bodies flickering like faulty neon signs, tongues lashing out with promises, and eyes that swallowed the light whole. "Stay and play!" cried one, her voice chiming like broken glass, anguish coiling around the innocence she once bore. I recognized her, a missing child of the town, her name lost to time and desperation. Before I could process the horror, she lunged toward me, arms outstretched, pleading with the innocence of a lost soul. I stumbled back, my heart racing as the figures erupted from the shadows, snarling and weeping simultaneously, entangled like vines twisted in an eternal embrace of suffering. The nursery spun, walls collapsing inward, squeezing the laughter and tears until they melded into a grotesque cacophony. I fought against the sheer weight of the space, forcing my limbs to move, retreating deeper into the nursery. A vivid flash of sepia-toned memories flooded my mind, laughter at the park, family dinners, the warmth of a mother's embrace, all eclipsed by the anguished pleas of the spectral children, their expressions morphing from glee to despair. "What do you want?" I shouted, tears mingling with the suffocating shadows, where darkness pooled ominously around me. "With you, we can be whole." A chorus of voices cried, each syllable launching tentacles of fear coiling tighter around me. My vision blurred, that terrible feeling rose within me, the urge to abandon reason, to fall into their yearning embrace. But just as I began to feel myself slipping, a moment of clarity flickered. I had taken an oath to protect this town, to hunt down the darkness that carved itself into our lives. I couldn't bow to it now. In a surge of instinct, I bolted towards the nursery window, desperate to escape, but my body crashed against the solid glass. It remained unyielding, an impregnable force, and I felt my heart plummet as the laughter intensified, swelling in a discordant symphony around me. Suddenly, the glass began to ripple, a distortion drawing me closer, a vortex spiraling of memory and foreboding. As I reached out, palm pressed against the refracting surface, the children melted from view, replaced by flashes of faces, lost sisters, brothers, sons, daughters, each merging into a mosaic of yearning and despair. Join us. And with a breath-stopping jolt, I realized they weren't just trapped souls, they were the lost, reaching for resolution and revenge. In the midst of it all, a face emerged that sent shockwaves through my body, crystal clear in spite of the chaos, the face of my sister, lost years ago, her eyes two hollow voids screaming my name. "Help me, please," she choked, each word a dagger buried deep in my heart, and then, at that very instant, the nursery erupted into a whirlpool of chaos. The figures lunged, shadows morphing into tangible fingers dragging me away from the glass, pulling me closer to the encroaching darkness. I was ripped from the threshold of choice, my fate entwined with theirs, the haunting whispers echoing louder and louder, melding into an agonizing crescendo. "Come home," they begged as the room whispered my name. Only I could feel its answer pressing closer, darker, and more insidious than anything I had ever known. In that breath, in that second of revelation, I understood fully. I wasn't meant to leave, I had been chosen to stay. The nursery warped, shifting into an embodiment of every nightmare I had ever harbored, every fear that had lurked in the recesses of my mind, as I felt the icy grasp of the forgotten children drag me down, down into their depths. Somewhere in that despair, the mirror shattered, and then, nothing but darkness engulfed me. It was in the unfathomable grip of nothingness that I experienced a jarring break. Flickering lights danced before my eyes, illuminating a dimly lit room filled with memories long buried. I blinked, trying to grasp the shifting reality, but each moment played tricks on my senses. The decay clung thickly to the walls, swirling with the scent of something rancid, grounding me in a nightmare I never could have imagined. That I was no longer in the nursery. The shadows that had enveloped me now receded slightly, revealing an expansive, empty hall. Vague outlines of furniture loomed like silent sentinels, their forms warped and grotesque, a mockery of safety. The echoes of children's laughter rang hollow here, the sound reverberating off the peeling wallpaper that seemed to shimmer and twitch under an unseen tension. "Help us," the soft, desperate whispers slithered around me, overlapping with the laughter. It enveloped me, a fog of sorrow and yearning that threatened to compress my lungs. As I stumbled through the space, my heart thudded relentlessly against my ribcage, fueling a visceral panic. Each step felt like a descent into a pit of despair, where every inch drawn closer to and yet somehow farther from the truth behind the haunted children and their plight. I felt eyes upon me, a gaze sharp and penetrating, yet obscured within the gloom. Spinning around, I attempted to pierce the oppressive darkness but found only flickers of movement, like fireflies mere inches from grasp. The oppressive atmosphere began to close in once more as the voices coalesced around me, now inclining towards malice. Shapes began to flicker through the corners of my vision, too swift to define but too persistent to ignore. The hallway seemed endless, stretching into infinity behind a veil of darkness, making it impossible to know which direction would yield my escape or if escape was even possible. Without warning, the whispers crescendoed into frantic pleas. Each child's face from the nursery appeared briefly before me, flashing like disjointed film reels, contorted in anguish. A piercing scream erupted from the depths of the corridor, breaking through the waves of despair, reminding me that I was not just an observer, I was being hunted. It was then that I perceived the source of the scream, a flicker of movement. A small figure darted into the light, stumbling against the remnants of a chair, desperately trying to catch its breath. I recognized this child. It was the one whose face had haunted me most, blinking back sorrow and pain, her eyes wild with secrets yet to be revealed. "Please. You have to keep moving," she cried, urgency choking her words. "They are coming for you. The others, they're angry." "Who?" I gasped, forcing my dread-washed legs to approach her. "What do you mean?" Before she could respond, the air turned cold, a palpable wave of despair washing over me as the darkness surged forward. From the void emerged more shadows, figures that clawed and reached, faces that morphed from despair into something terrifyingly rageful. Their cries wove through the air like barbed wires, sharper and more insistent. "Bring her back!" One howled, its voice splintering through the chaos, drenching the space in violence. "You took her. Give her to us." The child's expression twisted in terror, her small hands clenched to her chest as if she were shielding something precious, something they desired. "No. I want to go back," she shrieked, her eyes darting to mine, pleading silently for my help. Just then, the echoing laughter multiplied into a cacophony, a whirlwind of cacophonous cries and shrieks swirling around me. The air crackled with energy and malice. I backed away, clenching my fists, my palms slick with sweat. In a moment of clarity amidst the swirling terror, I recalled the stories whispered by the townsfolk, stories of children lost and wronged, the dark history that lingered like a specter over the rural edges of Montana. The rule I had broken was not just a guideline, it echoed the very essence of the curse sewn into the fabric of this land. "Where is she?" I shouted, driven by panic and the insatiable need for resolution. The children formed a barrier, blocking the doorway behind me. Their faces twisted and contorted as if in physical agony, their voices blending into a single roar. "You are the key. The one who has passed." They shrieked, spinning towards the flickering darkness behind me. I saw a void of disfigured faces, lightless eyes, and a void that promised annihilation. "She is important," they cried, their figures dissolving into the shadows then reforming instantaneously, buoyed by unresolved pain and fury. As the onslaught came closer, I instinctively pulled the little girl to me, clenching her tiny frame to shield her from the storm. My resolve hardened, I wouldn't let her suffer the same wrath that had taken so many. "Stay with me," I whispered, trying to rally both her spirit and my waning courage. "We'll face them together." And then through the thrumming darkness a figure stepped out, long and sinister, cloaked in shadows and memories lost. A face emerged from the depths, familiar yet unseen, a presence woven into my nightmares, and the moment I recognized her cold dread turned to fear that clawed inside me. The shadow knelt before us, revealing a hauntingly familiar visage, her features shimmering with all the warmth of lament and longing. "Why did you abandon me? Why did you break the promise?" Frozen in shock, I could only whisper a name, and as I did, I felt the cold steel of realization shatter inside. An answer awaited in the depths of the darkness, teetering ever closer, filled with unspeakable secrets I had yet to uncover. But just as it seemed I had time to question, the figures exploded forth, jagged and eager, reaching for us with tenacious resolve. The air vibrated violently with the weight of history and emotions too potent to contain, spiraling us deeper into the darkened embrace of the unknown, and with the children's hands stretching toward me in desperation, I understood, I was not merely an intruder in this forgotten chapter. One was the catalyst of their torment. The last thing I saw before the darkness enveloped me entirely was the flickering of the little girl's terrified eyes as she whispered one final plea, "Don't let them take me." Then, the walls shattered around us, plunging me into the heart of their despair. The air clung to me like a shroud, thick and suffocating, as I swirled back into the void, spiraling through the depths of a darkness more profound than I had ever known. Twisted whispers slithered through the murk, wrapping around my consciousness, almost coaxing me to succumb to despair, but I resisted, driven by the haunting image of the little girl I just clung to in my desperate embrace. The darkness was no longer just an absence of light, it pulsed with a grotesque life of its own, exuding an energy that crackled through me, instilling both fear and fury. All around, shadows slipped in and out, fragments of souls bound by sorrow and eternal rage, their moans swelling into an echo of the countless children lost to this place, children whose stories were tangled with my own. Sinking amid the cold grip of despair, I suddenly found myself in a familiar, long-abandoned place, the nursery. It loomed ominously, dust-covered and forlorn, as if nothing had changed in years. The walls wept with the residue of anguished nights, and as I looked around, I felt a sudden pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards the rickety dresser where the mirror hung, untouched by time. Breathless, I approached, the very air thick with unspoken histories, the memories of despair embedded in a glass reflecting a vision I couldn't yet comprehend. I lifted my hand, trembling as ice coursed through my veins, and brushed the glass with hesitant fingertips. "Help us!" The chorus of children once again rose, this time mingling with desperate, familiar cries from the depths of my mind. The flickering light in the nursery grew like a heartbeat, a seething pulse guiding me deeper, and then it happened just like before. The mirror began to ripple, shifting from a semblance of my world into something more sinister, an open maw beckoning me closer. Desperation seized me, an embrace I found hard to shake, as the faces of the children twisted, their mouths moving in frantic synchrony. "You must remember. You must take her place." My insides twisted with horror, the true horror dawning upon me with a weight heavier than I could bear. Through the undulating surface of the mirror, I glimpsed the face of the girl I had tried to save, her terrified eyes pleading, but even more an understanding began to unfold, that in escaping my shallow past, I had inadvertently entered their unfinished tale. Across the room, a shadowy figure solidified, emerging as an echo of my lost sister, her face twisted in a grotesque semblance of longing and pain. "Why did you leave?" Her voice was a haunting whisper, a cacophony of my own guilt twisted up in the tragedy of her being. With a wave of dark power, she extended her ghostly hand. "Become part of us. We can return together." Trapped in that moment, I felt the tangled web of years lost, decisions made in haste, and paths chosen become a vortex, pulling me deeper, clawing at my very essence. "No!" I screamed, but my voice was drowned in the flood of darkness surging forward, each step away from that mirror drawing me closer into despair's hungry embrace. "The darker one, the deepest shadow needs you," they chanted as the shadows twisted and wove around my ankles. A coldness pierced through me, gripping tight as the world began to fade, colors draining until all that remained was a monochrome nightmare. Facing the mirror now felt like peering into a new world, one that was achingly familiar but irrevocably tainted with grief. Then came the sound, a ripping, tearing sound that echoed within me, separating me from my light, the very thing that anchored my existence. "You must take her place." Echoed through the chaos once more, the darkness thickening like a storm as I wrestled with every ounce of my resolve. I wouldn't allow it. I wouldn't become one with their shadows. With an urgent surge of determination, I fought back, refusing to let the darkness swallow my soul entirely. "I refuse." I gasped, feeling in that moment a shift within the air, a sudden slip in the tide of shadows swirled around me. "I break this curse." With that declaration ringing loud in my mind, I felt the very essence of what I was, ignited, a beacon pushing against the encroaching darkness. In response, the shadows recoiled, momentarily disoriented, inching back as though stung. The mirror's surface exploded into shades of chaos, as the children's faces distorted into screams of anger, eyes filled with desperation reflected back at me. "You can't escape your fate." The voices thundered. "You are bound to us." But I would not falter. I racked my memory, the stories whispered in the town, the shared histories of loss and sorrow, and I tore through the shadows, ripping away layers of despair like peeling paint from accursed flesh. A darkness ran deep, threaded with childlike giggles gone silent. I reached through the glass, wresting control back, and through the glass, I saw a growing fracture in the mirror's illusion, light spilling forth, shining bright, a promise of liberation shimmering in the abyss. In that moment, I grasped the hand of the girl as it came opaque into view, clutching tightly, pulling her into the light with me. "You don't have to endure this any longer." I wept. And just then, I realized, with a jolt, a soul's worth echoed deeper than fear. It thrummed with the promise of redemption hidden within love, longing, and the essence of connection lost. As we surged through the fracture toward the light, I felt shadowy tendrils claw at my back, and in that final push, a scream reverberated, one of rage, of anguish, and maybe, just maybe, of something lost forever. We burst forth into the world once more, into soft, dawning light as I collapsed on the grass, breathless yet alive. I opened my eyes to see the sky brightening, and the once looming Anderson house stood there in the distance, oppressive and still yet eerily silent. The whispers finally curbed, but as the light washed away the shadows, I sensed it, a weight still lingering in the air, a remnant of bitterness. The sadness of what had transpired. In surrendering to their whispers, I had escaped from the darkness, but I lost something crucial. The echo of those children's voices paired with my sister's haunting gaze still sat heavy on my heart. Despite the weight lifting, darkness would linger, shadows would always hide in the corners of memory. And as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of the mirror wedged against a tree stump, cracked and splintered. Reflected within was my face, but alongside it was the absence, the shadows trailing nowhere. "No," I whispered, as realization crashed into my heart, an echo of their unwritten legacy. I had not broken the curse. I had merely added another layer to its haunting tapestry, and somewhere beneath the trees, I felt the whispers stir, a haunting reminder. I was free, but something of that darkness had become part of me. It would always be there, waiting for the moment I might falter. "Help us," echoed faintly as I walked away into the dawn, knowing that the shadows still lingered, just out of view, another tale waiting to be told. For as the sun rose higher in the sky, the whispers had found a home, and I now carried them with me wherever I went.